NTD News contributor and host of Can We Please Talk podcast. Also joining us is Tony Kinnett, national correspondent, The Daily Signal, and host, Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast. Good afternoon to you both. Tony, let me start with you today. Do you think a limited retaliatory strike like Israel's radar attack near Tehran, can that coexist with a declared ceasefire? Well, what are your thoughts on the situation?
Well, it's always good afternoon to you both, Don and Mike. Great to see you. I do think that this was a violation of the ceasefire. That's just an objective truth. And I say that as someone who supported a lot of Israel's actions in the Middle East. When a ceasefire is brokered, I don't like this up until the last minute nonsense. You don't have to do that. We already know that Israel has given Iran a very good talking to put it colloquially, with the targeted sites in the Iran strikes. It's just not necessary. I think in that up to the last minute ceasefire, Iran was always going to throw a couple of last minute waves. Of course, their ballistic missile supplies have been dwindling. And so I don't think that was very well advised. But then again, I'm not one of those that was in the room with those on the launch crews or the mission control rooms. So I kind of have to leave it there and say that I don't know if I can give a full summary and analysis as to how much they should or shouldn't have struck up until the last hour of the operation.
Okay, Mike, what's your perspective?
Yeah, well, good to see everybody, and you as well, Tony. Look, I think both things can be true here. As I've started to talk to more folks in our last episode, we had a former ISR coordinator for the U.S. Army on the program talking about, the coordination of these strikes and things like that. Like what Tony was mentioning, both things can be true here, right? With respect to Iran's regime and the terror that they have caused within the region. We also know that there is criticism that should be, at least put upon Bibi Netanyahu and the way he has carried out some of these things. And obviously, this is not excusing or absolving October 7th, but there are different things that are at play here with respect to the Middle East. And so when a ceasefire is put into place, and I'll echo the president's word without saying the curse word, like when a ceasefire is put into place and both parties have come to the table, at least mediators for both parties, acting both parties, come to the table and say, we're going to do this. There is no reason to take everything up until the last hour. So with respect to the strikes that Iran levied, and with respect to what the president has mentioned in terms of what Israel levied right up until the ceasefire, we all want to see peace be negotiated. That's what we want for this greater region. And again, the president had started this with the diplomatic talks a few months ago, and now unfortunately we're here in this situation.
And Tony, you've been watching this situation unfold. You've been following it. Does Trump seem more critical to you of Israel than Iran in this scenario?
I think that Trump came forward with a set of diplomatic procedures and then was given the middle finger by the Iranian regime, and that 60 days transpired. And then Trump said, "All right, Netanyahu, go right ahead," and that appears to be what occurred. And then Trump, again, after the strikes took place, after then sending the United States through, after Iran again refused to negotiate with the B-2 strike and the U.S. submarine strike, which was successful, the Iranian material now appearing, according to U.S. intelligence sources, to have been in Fordo. The president said, all right, are we ready to wrap this up yet? And then, again, for Israel then to do its own thing now after Trump brokered the ceasefire, I think there are a few other things at stake here. The Abraham Accords, which Trump wants to bring Saudi Arabia into, as well as other Middle Eastern nations. I think that Trump is losing his patience here because, again, if there's a lot of things riding on this, and as Mike said, there absolutely are. If you're going to see peace and economic cooperation between powers that can be trusted in the region, Iran notwithstanding, then you actually do need to see the powers that are in this coalitional movement here, Syria, Iraq, Qatar, and then in this case, Israel, actually playing by associative rules. And when they don't, Trump loses his patience because he has other things to think about in the world.
Mike, this is just a one-off reaction from Trump, right? The rebuke to Israel.
Well, we'll find out. I mean, I know speaking to Iranian Americans earlier today in preparation for this, some of them were telling me and sending me that clip, as he did that this morning before he boarded that helicopter. And they were like, this is him finally seeing the light on Israel. I wouldn't go that far, but I will say this is the first time I can recall the president at least cursing or showing his anger and reframing the way the question was asked of that journalist. The journalist asked, "What do you make of Iran's aggression?" And he's like, "It's not just Iran; it's Israel that's doing this." Israel unloaded, and then he continued on with the soliloquy. But Tony, I want to touch on something Tony just said there. You can ask anybody who teaches Middle East relations at any level, any university, or anybody that's been involved with the conflict. And the one country that they will always circle with, a very big circle in all of this, is Saudi Arabia, and how big of a player Saudi Arabia is in the region. So Tony's absolutely right. And I think the relationship that President Trump has with Saudi Arabia, this is about Iran and Saudi Arabia. Like, let's be honest, if we're being truly poignant about this, there's a mistrust with respect to what Iran does in the region. Saudi Arabia has obviously vast oil, but also has a lot of what they want to influence in the region. And the best relationship that President Trump has is with the Crown Prince, right, out in Saudi Arabia, outside of Benjamin Netanyahu. So there is something at play there with that dynamic. I don't know if this is a one-off, Don, but I will say that just hearing from people that, are either emotionally invested, have come from the region, have lived in the region, have now been part of the diaspora that's moved over here into the United States, they've all kind of echoed the same thing about that specific soundbite today, maybe starting to, take the bloom off the onion with respect to what Donald Trump perceives of Israel's involvement in all of this, especially when we have a relationship with them and we've told them not to do certain things, and then they go ahead and circumvent that and do something. So I think this is the first time you've kind of seen the president at least push back a little bit about what Israel is doing overall in the region.
Okay, Tony, of course, let me get your response to what Mike is saying, but let me also ask you on top of that, Trump is saying the U.S. is not pursuing a regime change, saying there's going to be chaos. Do you agree with that? And do you think it's possible to get rid of Iran's nuclear program completely without a regime change?
So I think that the last clause of that question is a little bit more difficult because we simply don't know. If you're talking about getting rid of a nuclear program, we're not quite sure. I think that former Secretary John Kerry got up in front of the country this morning and said, you can't erase the memory of how to make a nuclear bomb. Well, yes, you can. The top nuclear scientists are gone. Most of the data, according to intelligence sources from multiple countries, indicate that Iran no longer has a lot of the knowledge on giving nuclear materials. And Russia has stated several times before that it really doesn't want Iran having nuclear arms, despite the statement that ended up being deleted by Medvedev. So I do think you can remove Iran's nuclear program without a regime change to a degree. With that said, I don't think that the president is moving towards a kind of regime change. It's a term that has a lot of different interpretations because a regime change can mean a lot of different things in that. Are you just talking about the assassination of Khalil Khamenei? Are you talking about his successor? Are you talking about this many levels of the government? Are you talking about installing a new government, sending the crown prince in? Or do you foster some kind of a single nation republic? Or do you encourage the Kurds to split away? What does that mean with Turkey? There's a lot of stuff that we're getting into, and I'm only scratching the surface. So I don't think that right now, and you saw Netanyahu say this as well, neither party, whether regard to the US or Israel, is interested in directly implying regime change. That seems only to be Senator Lindsey Graham. In response to Mike's question, though, just briefly, I think that there's perhaps maybe not as much that Trump going against Israel for the first time here, as much as I would say parental exasperation. Just my read of the situation. I don't necessarily see this as a grand criticism of Israel's aggression, considering that Israel has been acting pretty much throughout the entire Gaza war through a response to offensive pressure from Iranian-backed militias. So I maybe, again, this might just be a different of perspective here. But from my thought, it seems more, oh, can you two just stop for a couple of seconds and let me take my aspirin?
Okay, Mike, Iran said it remains with hands on trigger. Does it feel like to you this is perhaps a rather fragile ceasefire?
Yeah, I mean, fragile ceasefire is probably a good way to put it. But again, we have to see what the next 24 to 48 hours kind of lay out here and shake out in terms of all of this. We have to see what the president will say at the NATO summit. Just going back to a little bit of what you were asking, Tony, the regime change part of this, like the U.S. is not that good at regime changes. Okay, folks, I don't know who needs to hear this, and especially in that region, we are not that good at regime changes. And when we did try this, and I'll just give the Iraq example, Iran is double the size of Iraq, maybe 2.5 times the size of Iraq. And so to put, Mohammed Mokbar, as who's now the acting president right now, to like what Tony said, right, to assassinate the Ayatollah, and of only, I think Lindsey Graham has actually called for this. So very, very spot on there, Tony. I think only Lindsey Graham has actually said these type of words. You can see that there are a lot of lawmakers and there are people within the U.S. government that are like, we don't have an interest in that, because all that does is sow chaos and discord. And it leads to, let's be honest, instability in a country far bigger than the country that we spent, years within a war. And that led to obviously other wars. But like, that's the problem with this, right? The U.S. and I think President Trump, I know he ran on this no new wars thing. And again, as I've talked to military experts on this, they don't consider what we did in Iran as starting a war, because again, not striking civilian areas or population. This was targeted strikes to certain things. So now with this actions, now, as everybody has mentioned, people come to the table, and now we have a ceasefire, potential negotiation. The problem is now we've got two, I would say, bad actors, but when I say bad actors, it's like a seesaw, right? Like the seesaw's in one direction with respect to Iran being the bad actor versus Israel being the bad actor. And the president's trying to navigate that. To Tony's analogy about parental guidance, I would say it's more big brother guidance, because Israel's our little brother and Iran's just a neighbor down the street with the kid that they're trying to play with. So I think that that's something that the president is truly trying to navigate here, and understanding the relationship that we do have with Israel, not only from a military perspective, funding that they get from us, but also understanding what Iran has done in the region and the proxies that it has in the region, and the fact that there is a potential to strike U.S. targets, whether it be military bases out there, but also these sleeper cells that are living here in the U.S. that could potentially harm Americans here on American soil. So it's a dangerous situation. Is it a fragile ceasefire? We won't know, Don, until at least a few days from now, maybe a few weeks from now, months from now. This could be something that's everlasting. Who knows?
Okay, Tony, let me get your comments on the strategic interests for the U.S. in wanting peace between Israel and Iran. Because, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but this comes very sudden after those bombs fell from the U.S. To Iran.
Well, it's not sudden just in the bombs fell on Iran. It's the complete and total annihilation of the Iranian surface-to-air missile system, its air defenses, its entire air force. To have your threat to block the Strait of Hormuz laughed off by China is incredibly humiliating. I mean, as for a nation with 90 million people, its military strength is so feeble that they have been reduced as far as what we believe to be their ballistic missile launching capacity by like 80%. And they don't have all of the things that we were promised, for example, by isolationists on the left and the right here at home. So I think the better question as to what the strategic interests are for peace between Israel and Iran actually have more to do with the internal security of the United States. The biggest argument for the Ayatollah and his regime no longer exuding the fundamentalist Shia Islamic terror in that region is that there are sleeper cells in the United States, is that they have the capacity. They have these militias like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, which do strike not just at Israeli targets, not just at Jewish targets, but also at American targets, at British targets, at anyone they deem to be a Christian. This kind of stuff is the religious persecution that's gross no matter where it happens, no matter whom it happens to, when or where. And so when we look at this kind of a situation, if the Iranians being able to threaten the United States and say, well, we'll activate terror cells, I'm sorry, but just backing down and saying, okay, well, we'll give you a couple more pallets of cash as a prior administration did is an incredibly foolish move. So is the answer to that regime change? Not necessarily, but I think the bigger strategic interest to getting a permanent solution to this is, well, are we going to try the European strategy in the 18th century of paying off the Barbary state pirates, or is Thomas Jefferson going to come in and set things straight? None of that involved building a new regime in that country like Iraq and Afghanistan.
Okay, Mike, final thoughts.
Yeah, final thought. I mean, the one thing that I would ask, if I could ask the president something here, and it's really about what's the end goal? Because I think we've talked about this and we've danced around this conversation a little bit here, but a ceasefire is not a everlasting solution to all of this, right? It's a temporary Band-Aid, let's be honest, in all of this, right? Because it doesn't change the relationships and the dynamics that are at play in the Middle East. So I think over the next couple of days, my hope is that media outlets continue to focus on what is the end goal here, because there was already something in place with Iran's nuclear deal. Now, again, are we going to go back to something like that framework-wise? Is there a diplomatic approach to this, like the president has tried with respect to Russia, Ukraine? What is the end goal here? And then on the flip side, it's really about Israel. And I know Bibi Netanyahu is scheduled to make an appearance, I believe, in Washington, D.C. over these next couple of days or weeks and potentially give a speech in front of Congress. But like, there has to be some end goal here with respect to not only the war in Gaza, but now what is happening in Iran. A ceasefire is a Band-Aid. And what we need is a long-term solution for peace and stability in the region. I live in the category that is of what President Trump ran on, which is no new wars, no more wars. Forget no new wars, no more wars. And so we need a finality to this, and I want to see where that ends up over these next couple weeks, months, and years.
Well, all right, we're out of time today. Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you.